Welcome to another episode with your host, Robert E. Hansen, psychic medium, author, and public speaker.
Hi, welcome back. Today I'd like to share a story with you guys about an authentic reading that I did, Tales from the Other Side. This is going back a little bit in time with me, but I think you might find this story extremely interesting. I was working in a different location. At one time, I was located in a town called Wantagh, New York. It's a local hamlet here on Long Island. And we had a group session, which we call the gallery session. It's a gathering of a bunch of people. And usually the numbers range anywhere from 20 to 30 people, all sitting in a big room. And it was raining outside. It was pretty raining. The rain was coming down pretty good. Most of my guests had gotten there pretty early, and they were seated. But there was one woman that happened to come in a little bit late. Now, normally when I'm doing my work, if I'm already in the reading process, I don't let people entrance or exit during that time. Unless there's an emergency, I just say, please stay seated. Or if people come late, I say, I'm sorry, I'll have to come to a different session. Because once I'm in the groove, once I'm really dealing with people where death is being discussed and family pain and sorrow is coming out, I don't like people just walking into the middle of that. So that was kind of my policy. But this woman came in, she was like kind of a little bit soaked. Her hair was a little bit down. She had an umbrella. She threw it to the side. And I said, okay, please come in and sit down. And she happened to find a seat in the front row, which was a little unusual, but there happened to be one seat in the front row, and she sat there. So I'm doing the readings over the course of the evening, people who had cancer and people who had a car accident or someone that had a grandfather that died in the emergency room. And, the very typical, unfortunately sad parts of our human experience. But, everybody kind of recognized these various stories in this different flow of energy that was in the room. Some people were laughing, some people were crying, some people sat there with their arms crossed. They didn't know what to make of it. I get a whole host of different types of really nice folks that try to come. And like in any audience, of course, I expect the skeptics. I expect people who are like fanatical believers. I expect people who don't know what to make of all of this. I get a whole host of people that come through. That being said, I'm explaining the process to people and I'm doing this work. And as it turns out, the reading shifts to this lady, to this woman that came in late. And as it also turned out, she happened to be the last reading of the evening. I was almost ready to finish my night. I was about to say goodbye to everybody. I felt like I was done. We had spent a good hour and a half, 2 hours in work, and everybody was in various levels of laughter and crying. There was tissues on the floor sometimes. The typical experience when, grief is in the room. So I said, wait a second, guys, before I leave, I have to bring a reading to this woman who just came in. And, people were very, very polite, very understanding, and everybody stayed in their seats. It was really good. And I remember this like yesterday, and I said, you came by yourself, obviously. You're sitting here alone. She goes, yes, I live by myself now. And, I came alone, yeah. I said, all right. I said, I want to do this for you, but what I'm seeing, I'm almost having difficulty believing it myself. It's almost impossible for me to accept this as true, but I have to kind of tell you what I'm seeing here. So she just stared at me, just looked at me, and the audience was kind of looking at me too. And I said, unless I misunderstand this, I'm really, really sorry, but I have the presence here of a young adult male, a young adult. And when I say young, at that time, I would say he was probably in his mid-30s, something like that. And he's making me feel that he is your only child. Your only child. Do you understand this? And she said, yes. My only child has crossed over, has died. And I'm not sure how you know that, but that's a very true comment. And then it really started to widen. Now, what I mean by widen, it simply means in the experience of what is called clairvoyance. Clairvoyance, by the way, and I've done other talks about this in other posts, is clear sight. Clear sight meaning that you were seeing something internally through the receiving system of the brain that is very clear to the brain, as compared to something that is being told for the brain to look for. You see, this is a big distinction. When someone who is suggesting they have a psychic gift is looking for something, that's kind of is a hint that they're struggling. When someone is clear or clairvoyant, they don't look for anything. They're just open to what is coming through or to what will being sent. They're not searching for a particular item or a particular idea or a particular event, which is very commonly asked by certain people. Well, can't you tell me about what happened on July 4th weekend or something? And people are going, hold on, let me see. And they try to do that. And Frank, with respect to everybody listening, I've never seen that occur. It may have happened on a rare, like a blind squirrel finds an acorn kind of a deal, but I have never, ever seen that on a consistent basis with any of some very gifted mediums that I've seen. I've never seen it. However, that being set to the side, let's go back to the story. So I described to this woman how her son had died. And I said to her, I said, what's bothering me or upsetting me for you is the fact that this handsome young man, apparently he was a good-looking guy. She goes, oh, yes, my son was handsome. And I said, to myself, I said, every mother thinks their child is handsome, of course. But in this case, I felt like he was a kind of a good-looking guy, like a model almost, And she said, he wasn't a model, but he was a very good-looking guy. And I said, well, what's odd, though, is he's making me feel he lived alone, and there's nothing wrong, obviously, with an adult man living alone. If he's not married, he lives alone. But he makes me feel that he was kind of a loner, like almost like a little bit of a social, not an outcast, but he preferred his privacy. He didn't really like to commingle. He didn't come across as a guy that really was big in the limelight kind of a deal. She goes, that's true. He did live a kind of a solitary life. He liked to study. He liked books. And he had a big thing for animals. He loved animals. She said he really enjoyed animals. And then it shifted. And I looked at her and I said, he was found deceased in an upstairs apartment in a house upstairs. And then she really started to stare at me and she says, that's right. I said, my son rented a room in a person's home or an apartment house. I forget, to be very fair. I don't recall. But it wasn't like a typical apartment house like you might see in Brooklyn or New York City or something. It was a dwelling, whether it be a townhouse or an upstairs, but I know he was upstairs. And I said, he's showing me or making me feel that he was discovered by the police, that this is an event sometimes that occurs. It's called in the cop world a welfare check. In other words, someone has either tried to reach out to somebody, phone call, text, a letter, and it remains unresponded to. The person they're trying to have contact with is not reacting, not responding to them. And the person on the other end is saying, what the heck is going on? They don't live nearby. I just can't drive over there. Perhaps they live out of state or several miles away or hours away, I should say. And they just don't want to drive because he's at the laundromat or something and waste the whole afternoon doing that. But this had gone on for a few days, which made the mother, of course, have high anxiety. She didn't know why he was not reacting. And I kind of described this all to her in the session. And she's really looking at me, and the audience is really looking at me. And I said, you're the one, and I pointed to her. I said, you're the one that made the welfare check. Did you not call the police? And she goes, I did. I did call the police to please go to my son's apartment and check on him. So they gave the police permission to enter into his apartment. And I take it the cops went, they knocked on the door, banged on the windows, and then they finally had legal entry to enter into the apartment. And they went in and they found your son deceased. And they're making me feel, and this young man is making me feel, your child, that he was found dead due to an overdose of a drug of some type. And, her head kind of dropped and she said, yes, my son did have an addiction to painkillers, and he was in trouble with that, and he did inject some kind of a pain medication into his system, and it found him deceased. So everyone exhaled. I said, I'm so sorry about this, but I said, this is the part that I have never, ever seen before, and doing this dialogue now, I have never seen it since. So this is a one-time shot that I saw going back some time ago. And I said to her, when the cops found your son, did they find a dead monkey, a monkey like you would see like in the zoo, laying on his chest? And she let out a scream. And she said, yes, they found a dead monkey on my son's chest. I said, a monkey? And she said, my son owned a small monkey that he had that lived in the apartment. It had a cage, it had food and water. It was my son's legal pet. He was allowed to have it. And that monkey would just run around the apartment like a dog or a cat. And instead it was a monkey. And when my son died, the monkey got no food, no water, no nothing. And at a certain point in time, they believed that the monkey crawled up on him in some way to either sense that he had died and was responding to that as an animal, or the monkey was kind of trying to shake him to say, I'm dying of thirst, I need food, I need water, I'm perishing, I need help. And of course, he being deceased, he could not respond in any way. And the monkey eventually either got cold or felt the connection to his companion, which is her son, and decided to lay down and perhaps fell asleep and never woke up. But when these police officers came into that home, they found her son, unfortunately dead, deceased from a drug overdose. But in addition to that, they found this dead monkey on on his chest. And the mother just cried and wept. And at the end, people were standing up, shaking their heads. I'll never forget it. And she looked at me and she says, dear God, Robert, no one, and I mean no one, knows that my son died the way you just described and what happened and what they found on my boy's chest. It was incredible. Even for myself who do this work and did that work even at that time quite a bit, I have never had that type of an experience before. I kind of hope I never have that particular thing happen again. But to validate, to prove beyond any measure whatsoever that her son was with her in that room, attending that session, standing next to her as a soul, it was unrelenting. It was incredible. It was beautiful. She wept not only for the loss of her child, but she also wept for his sacred presence. And his sacred presence came to find his own mother on a rainy night in the town of Wantor many years ago. Thanks for tuning in.